Hi everybody, welcome back to Goodnight Stories. My name is Lyra and I will be your guide into whatever book we decide to read tonight. From young readers to young adult novels, my hope is to give you a comfortable space to listen to a story while you work or doze. So sit back, relax, and grab a cup of tea if you'd like. Tonight we start Erin Hunter's Forest of Secrets, book 3 of the First Warrior series. Prologue. Cold gripped the forest, fields and moorland like an icy claw. Snow covered everything, glittering faintly under a new moon. Nothing broke the silence in the forest except for the occasional soft rush of snow sliding from the branches of the trees and the faint rasping of dried reeds when the wind swept through them. Even the murmur of the river was stilled by the ice that stretched from bank to bank. There was a flicker of movement at the edge of the river. A large tomcat, his bracken-colored fur fluffed up against the cold, emerged from the reeds. He shook snow impatiently from his paws as he sank into the soft drifts with every step. In front of him, 2 tiny kits struggled forward with faint mews of distress. They floundered in the powdery snow, the fur on their legs and belly matted into icy clumps, but every time they tried to stop, the tomcat nudged them on. The 3 cats trudged along the river until it widened out, and they drew level with a small island not far from the bank. Thick beds of reeds surrounded it, their dry stems poking up through the ice. Stunted, leafless willow trees concealed the center of the island behind snow-covered boughs. Almost there, the bracken-colored Tom meowed encouragingly. "Follow me." He slid down the bank into a narrow frozen pathway through the reeds and leapt onto the dry, crisp earth of the island. The bigger of the 2 kits scrambled after him, but the smaller one collapsed on the ice and crouched there pitifully. After a moment's pause, the tomcat jumped down beside it and tried to nudge it to its paws, but it was too exhausted to move. The tomcat gave its ears a lick, roughly comforting the helpless scrap, and then picked it up by the scruff of the neck and carried it onto the island. Beyond the willow trees was a stretch of open ground, broken by bushes. Snow covered the earth here, crisscrossed by the paw marks of many cats. The clearing seemed deserted, but bright eyes gleamed from shelter, watching the tomcat as he led the way to the largest clump of bushes and through the outer wall of the tangled branches. The icy chill of the air outside gave way to warmth of the nursery, and the smell of milk. In a deep nest of moss and heather, a gray she-cat was suckling a single tabby kit. She raised her head as the tomcat drew closer and gently set down the kit he was carrying. The second kit staggered into the nursery behind him and tried to scrabble its way into the nest. "Oakhart?" meowed the she-cat. "What have you got there?" "Kits, Greypool," Oakhart replied. "Will you take them?" "They need a mother to look after them." But Greypool's amber eyes were shocked. "Whose kits are they? They're not RiverClan's." "Where did you get them?" "I found them in the forest." Oakhart did not meet the she-cat's eyes as he spoke. "They're lucky a fox didn't find them first." "In the forest?" meowed the queen, her voice rasping with disbelief. "Oakhart, don't talk to me as if I'm mouse-brained. What cat would abandon her kits in the forest, especially in weather like this?" Oakhart shrugged. "Rogues, maybe, or 2 legs. How would I know? I couldn't leave them there, could I?" He nosed the smaller kit, which was lying completely still except for the rapid rise and fall of its tiny ribs as it breathed. Graypool, please, your other kits died, and these will die too unless you help them. Graypool's eyes clouded with pain. She looked down at the two kits. Their tiny mouths gaped pink as they mewed pitifully. I have plenty of milk, she murmured, half to herself. Of course I'll take them. Oakhart puffed out his breath in a sigh of relief. He picked up the first kit and then the other, and laid them next to Graypool. She nudged them gently into the curve of her belly next to her own kit, where they began to suckle eagerly. I still don't understand, Graypool meowed when they were settled. Why would two kits be alone in the forest in the middle of Leaf Bear? Their mother must be frantic. The bracken-colored Tom prodded a piece of moss with one massive front paw. I didn't steal them, if that's what you're thinking. Graypool looked at him for a long moment. No, I don't think you did, she meowed at last. But you're not telling me the whole truth, are you? I've told you all you need to know. No, you haven't. Graypool's eyes flashed with anger. What about their mother? I know what it's like to lose kits, Oakhart. I wouldn't wish that kind of grief on any cat. Oakhart lifted his head and glared at her. A faint growl came from the depths of his throat. Their mother is probably some rogue cat. This is not the weather to go looking for her. But Oakhart, just take the kits, please. The bracken-colored Tom sprang to his paws and turned abruptly to push his way out of the nursery. I'll bring you some fresh kill, he meowed over his shoulder as he left. When he had gone, Graypool bent her head over the kits, rasping her tongue over their fur to warm them. The melting snow had washed away most of their scent, though Graypool could still make out the odors of the forest, of dead leaves and frostbitten earth, and there was something beneath that, fainter still. Graypool paused in her licking. Had she really sensed that, or was she imagining things? Dipping her head again, she opened her mouth to breathe in the kit's scents. Her eyes grew wider, and she stared unblinkingly into the dark shadows that edged the nursery. She was not wrong. The fur of these two motherless kits, whose origins Oakhart refused to explain, unmistakably carried the scent of an enemy clan. Chapter 1. The icy wind whirled snow into Fireheart's face as he struggled down the ravine toward the ThunderClan camp. The mouse he had just killed gripped firmly in his jaws. The flakes were falling so thickly that he could scarcely see where he was going. His mouth watered as the prey scent of the mouse filled his nostrils. He hadn't eaten since the previous night, a grim sign of how scarce prey was in Leaf Bear. Hunger clawed at his belly, but Fireheart would not break the warrior code. The clan must be fed first. A glow of pride briefly drove off the chill from the snow that matted his flame-colored coat, as Fireheart remembered the battle that had taken place only 3 days before. He had joined the other ThunderClan warriors to help support WindClan when the Moorland cats were attacked by the other two clans in the forest. Many cats had been injured in the battles, so it was even more important for those who could still hunt to bring home prey. As Fireheart pushed his way through the gorse tunnel leading into camp, he dislodged snow from the spiky branches above, and he flicked his ears as the cold lumps fell on his head. The thorn trees around the camp gave some shelter from the wind, but the clearing in the center of the camp was deserted. All the cats preferred to stay in their dens to keep warm when the snow lay this thick. Broken tree stumps and the branches of a fallen tree poked above the covering of snow. A single line of paw prints crossed from the apprentice's den to the bramble thicket where the kits were cared for. Seeing the trail, Fireheart could not help remembering that he was without an apprentice now, since Cinderpaw had been injured beside the Thunderpath. Trotting across the snow into the heart of the camp, Fireheart dropped his mouse on the pile of fresh kill near the bush where the warrior slept. The pile was pitifully small. Such prey as could be found was thin and scrawny, hardly a mouthful for a famished warrior. There would be no more plump mice until New Leaf, and that was many moons away. Fireheart was turning away, ready to go back on hunting duty, when a loud meow sounded behind him. He whirled around. Shouldering his way out of the warrior's den was the clan deputy, Tigerclaw. Fireheart padded through the snow toward him, respectfully lowering his head, but conscious that the huge tabby's amber eyes burned into him. All his misgivings about Tigerclaw flooded through him again. The deputy was strong, respected, and an outstanding fighter, but Fireheart knew there was darkness in his heart. You don't need to go out hunting again tonight. Tigerclaw growled as Fireheart approached. Bluestar has chosen you and Graystripe to go to the gathering. Fireheart's ears twitched with excitement. It was an honor to accompany the clan leader to the gathering where all 4 clans met in peace at a full moon. We had better eat now, added the dark-coated deputy. We leave at moonrise. He began to stalk across the clearing toward the high rock where Bluestar, the clan leader, had her den. Then he paused and swiveled his massive head to look back at Fireheart. Just make sure you remember which clan you belong to at the gathering, he hissed. Fireheart felt his fur bristle as anger flared inside him. What makes you say that? He demanded boldly. Do you think I would be disloyal to my own clan? Tigerclaw turned to face him, and Fireheart tried hard not to flinch at the menace in the cat's tense shoulders. I saw you in the last battle. The deputy's voice was a low growl, and his ears were flattened against his head as he spat. I saw you let that River Clan warrior escape. Fireheart winced, his mind flashing back to the battle in the Wind Clan camp. What Tigerclaw said was true. Fireheart had allowed a River Clan warrior to flee without a scratch, but not out of cowardice or disloyalty. The warrior had been Silverstream. Unknown to the rest of ThunderClan, Fireheart's best friend, Graystripe, was in love with her, and Fireheart could not bring himself to wound her. Fireheart had done his best to talk his friend out of visiting Silverstream. Their relationship went against the warrior code and put both of them in grave danger, but Fireheart also knew that he would never betray Graystripe. Besides, Tigerclaw had no right to accuse any cat of disloyalty. He had stood on the edge of the battle watching while Fireheart fought for his life against another River Clan warrior, and turned away instead of helping him. And that was not the worst accusation Fireheart could make against the deputy. He suspected Tigerclaw of murdering the former ThunderClan deputy, Redtail, and even planning to get rid of their leader herself. If you think I'm disloyal, tell Bluestar, he meowed challengingly. Tigerclaw drew back his lips in a snarl and dropped into a half-crouch, sliding out his long claws. I don't need to bother Bluestar, he hissed. I can deal with a kitty pet like you. He stared at Fireheart for a moment longer. Fireheart realized with a jolt that there was a trace of fear as well as distrust in the blazing amber eyes. Tigerclaw wonders how much I know, he thought suddenly. Fireheart's friend Ravenpaw, Tigerclaw's own apprentice, had witnessed the murder of Redtail. Tigerclaw had tried to kill him to keep him quiet, so Fireheart had taken him to live with Barley, a loner who lived near a two-leg farm on the other side of Wind Clan's territory. Fireheart had tried to tell Ravenpaw's story to Bluestar, but the clan leader refused to believe that her brave deputy could be guilty of such a thing. As he glared at Tigerclaw, Fireheart's frustration returned. He felt as if a tree had fallen and pinned him to the ground. Without another word, Tigerclaw swung around and stalked away. As Fireheart watched him go, there was a rustling from inside the warrior's den, and Graystripe poked his head out through the branches. What on earth are you doing? He meowed. Picking fights with Tigerclaw like that. He'll turn you into crow food. No cat has the right to call me disloyal, Fireheart argued. Graystripe bent his head and gave his chest fur a couple of quick licks. I'm sorry, Fireheart, he muttered. I know this is all because of me and Silverstream. No, it isn't, Fireheart interrupted, and you know it. Tigerclaw's the problem, not you. He shook himself, scattering snow from his coat. Come on, let's eat. Graystripe pushed the rest of the way out and bounded toward the pile of fresh kill. Fireheart followed him, picked out a vole, and carried it back to the warrior's den to eat. Graystripe crouched beside him, near the outer curtain of branches. Whitestorm and a couple of other senior warriors were curled up asleep in the center of the bush, but otherwise the den was empty. Their sleeping bodies warmed the air and barely any snow had penetrated the thick canopy of branches. Fireheart took a mouthful of vole. The meat was tough and stringy, but he was so hungry that it tasted delicious. It was gone far too quickly, but it was better than nothing, and it would give him the strength he needed to travel to the gathering. When Graystripe had finished his meal in a few ravenous gulps, the two cats lay close together, grooming each other's cold fur. It was a relief to Fireheart to share tongues like this with Graystripe again, after the troubling time when it seemed that Graystripe's love for Silverstream would destroy his friendship with Fireheart. Even though Fireheart still worried about his friend's forbidden affair, since the battle he and Graystripe had rekindled their friendship so it was as close as before. They needed to trust each other if they were to survive the long season of Leafbear, and even more than that, Fireheart knew he needed Graystripe's support against Tigerclaw's growing hostility. "I wonder what news we'll hear tonight," he murmured in his friend's gray ear. "I hope RiverClan and ShadowClan have learned their lesson. WindClan won't be driven out of their territory again." Graystripe shifted uncomfortably. "The battle wasn't just greed for territory," he pointed out. "Prey is even scarcer than usual. RiverClan are starving since the Two Legs moved into their territory." "I know." Fireheart flicked his ears in reluctant sympathy, understanding that his friend would want to defend Silverstream's clan. But forcing another clan out of their territory isn't the answer. Graystripe muttered agreement, and then fell silent. Fireheart knew how he must have felt. It was only a few moons since they had crossed the Thunder Path to find WindClan and bring them home. Yet Graystripe was bound to sympathize with RiverClan too, because of his love for Silverstream. There was no easy answers. The shortage of prey would be a desperate problem for all four clans, at least until Leafbear relaxed its cruel grip on the forest. Growing drowsy under the steady rasp of Graystripe's tongue, Fireheart jumped at the rustle of branches outside the den. Tigerclaw entered, followed by Darkstripe and Longtail. All three of them glowered at Fireheart as they settled and huddled closer to the center of the bush. Fireheart watched them through slitted eyes, wishing they could make out their conversation. It was too easy to imagine they were plotting against him. Fireheart's muscles tensed as he realized that he would never be safe within his own clan while Tigerclaw's treachery remained a secret. "What's the matter?" asked Graystripe, lifting his head. Fireheart stretched, trying to relax again. "I don't trust them," he murmured, flicking his ears in the direction of Tigerclaw and the others. "I don't blame you," meowed Graystripe. "If Tigerclaw ever found out about Silverstream..." He shuddered. Fireheart pressed closer to his side, comforting him while his ears still strained to catch what Tigerclaw was saying. He thought he heard his own name and was tempted to creep a little closer, but just then he caught Longtail's eyes. "What are you staring at, kitty pet?" hissed the tabby warrior. "ThunderClan only wants loyal cats." Deliberately, he turned his back on Fireheart. Fireheart sprang to his paws at once. "And who gave you the right to question our loyalty?" he spat. Longtail ignored him. "That does it." Fireheart mewed in a fierce undertone to Graystripe. "It's obvious that Tigerclaw is spreading rumors about me." "But what can you do?" Graystripe sounded resigned to the deputy's hostility. "I want to talk to Ravenpaw again," Fireheart meowed. "He might remember something else about the battle, something I could use to convince Bluestar. But Ravenpaw lives at the Two-Leg Farm now. You'd have to go all the way across WindClan territory. How would you explain being out of the camp for so long? It would only make Tigerclaw's lies seem like a truth." Fireheart knew he was willing to take that risk. He had never asked Ravenpaw for any details about how Redtail had died in the battle against RiverClan all those moons ago. At the time, it had seemed more important to get the apprentice out of Tigerclaw's way. Now he knew that he had to find out exactly what Ravenpaw saw, because he was becoming more and more certain that his friend must know something that could prove just how dangerous Tigerclaw was to the clan. "I'll go tonight," Fireheart mewed softly, "after the gathering. I'm going to slip away. If I bring back fresh kill, I can say I've been hunting." "You're taking a big risk," mewed Graystripe, giving Fireheart's ear a quick and affectionate lick. "But Tigerclaw is my problem too. If you're determined to go, then I'm coming with you." The snow had stopped and the clouds had cleared away by the time the ThunderClan cats, Fireheart and Graystripe among them, left the camp and headed through the forest toward Four Trees. The snow-covered ground seemed to glow in a white light of the full moon, and the frost glittered on every twig and stone. A breeze blew toward them, ruffling the surface of the snow and bearing the scent of many cats. Fireheart shivered with excitement. The territories of all 4 clans met in the sacred hollow, and at every full moon a truce was declared for the clans to gather beneath the 4 great oaks that stood in the center of the steep-sided clearing. Fireheart fell in behind Bluestar, who had already dropped into a crouch to creep the last few tail lengths to the top of the slope and peer down into the glade. A rock reared up in the center of the clearing between the oaks, its jagged outline black against the snow. As Fireheart waited for Bluestar's signal to move, he watched the other clan cats greeting one another below. He could not help noticing the glares and raised hackles as WindClan faced the cats of RiverClan and ShadowClan. Clearly none of them had forgotten the recent battle. If it weren't for the truce, they would be clawing one another's fur out. Fireheart recognized Tallstar, the leader of WindClan, sitting near the great rock, with his deputy, Deadfoot, beside him. Not far away, Running Nose and Mudfur, the medicine cats of ShadowClan and RiverClan, sat side by side, gazing at the other clan cats with eyes that reflected the moon. Beside Fireheart, Graystripe's muscles were tense, and his yellow eyes glowed with excitement as he stared out into the glade. Following his gaze, Fireheart saw Silverstream emerge from the shadow, her beautiful black and silver coat rippling in the moonlight. Fireheart suppressed a sigh. If you're going to talk to her, be careful who sees you, he warned his friend. Don't worry, Graystripe meowed. His front paws kneaded the hard ground as he waited for the moment when he could be with the RiverClan cat again. Fireheart glanced at Bluestar, expecting her to give the signal to descend into the clearing, but instead he saw Whitestorm pad up and crouch beside her in the snow. Bluestar, Fireheart heard the noble white warrior murmur. What are you going to say about Broken Tail? Will you tell the other clans that were sheltering him? Fireheart waited tensely for Bluestar's answer. Broken Tail had once been Broken Star, leader of ShadowClan. He had murdered his own father, Ragged Star, and stolen kits from ThunderClan. In retaliation, ThunderClan had helped Broken Star's own clan to drive him out into the forest. Not long after, Broken Star had led a band of rogue cats to attack the ThunderClan camp. In the battle, Yellowfang, the ThunderClan medicine cat, had scratched his eyes, and now Broken Tail was a prisoner, blind and defeated. Even though the former leader had been stripped of his StarClan given name and was kept under close guard, Fireheart knew that the other clans would expect ThunderClan to have killed him or driven him out to die in the forest. They wouldn't welcome the news that Broken Tail was still alive. Bluestar kept her gaze fixed on the cats in the clearing below. I will say nothing, she replied to Whitestorm. It doesn't concern the other clans. Broken Tail is ThunderClan's responsibility now. Brave words, growled Tigerclaw from where he sat on the other side of Bluestar. Or are we ashamed to admit what we've done? ThunderClan has no need to be ashamed for showing mercy, Bluestar retorted coolly. But I see no reason to go looking for trouble. Before Tigerclaw could protest, she sprang to her paws and faced the rest of ThunderClan. Listen, she meowed. No cat is to talk about the attack by the rogue cats or mention Broken Tail. These are matters for our clan alone. She waited until meows of agreement came from the assembled cats, then she flicked her tail to signal that the ThunderClan cats could join the other clans below. She raced down through the bushes, with Tigerclaw just behind her, his huge paws scattering snow. Fireheart bounded after them. As he slid out of the bushes into the clearing, he saw that Tigerclaw had stopped close by. And was giving him a suspicious stare. Graystripe, Fireheart hissed quietly over his shoulder. I don't think you should go off with Silverstream tonight. Tigerclaw's already... Fireheart suddenly realized that Graystripe was no longer beside him. Looking around, he saw his friend disappearing behind the great rock. A heartbeat or two later, Silverstream skirted around a group of ShadowClan cats and followed him. Fireheart sighed, and he glanced at Tigerclaw, wondering if the deputy had seen them go. But Tigerclaw had padded away to join One Whisker from WindClan, and Fireheart let the fur lie flat on his shoulders again. Pacing restlessly across the clearing, Fireheart found himself near a group of elders, Patchpelt from ThunderClan, and others he did not know, crouching beneath a glossy-leafed holly bush, where the snow did not lie so thickly. Keeping one eye out for Graystripe, Fireheart settled down to listen to their conversation. I remember a leaf bear even worse than this. It was an old black Tom who spoke, his muzzle turned to silver and his flanks scarred from many fights. He had the scent of WindClan on his short, pashy fur. The river was frozen for more than 3 moons. You're right, Crowfur, a tabby queen agreed, and prey was scarcer too, even for a river clan. For a heartbeat, Fireheart felt surprised that 2 elders from recently hostile clans could talk calmly without spitting hatred at each other. But then, they were elders, he reflected. They must have seen many battles in their long lives. Young warriors today, the old black cat added with a glance at Fireheart. They don't know what hardship is. Fireheart scruffled among the dead leaves under the bush and tried to look respectful. Patchpelt crouched close to him, gave him a friendly flick with his tail. That must have been the season when Bluestar lost her kits, recalled the ThunderClan elder. Fireheart pricked up his ears. He remembered Dappletail saying something once before about Bluestar's kits, which were born just before she became clan deputy. But he'd never learned how many kits she had had, or how old they were when they died. Do you remember the thaw that leaf bear, Crowfur? Interrupted Fireheart's thoughts, his eyes unfocused as he lost himself to the memories. The river in the gorge was nearly as far as the badger sets. Patchpelt shivered. I remember it well. ThunderClan couldn't cross the stream to come here for the gathering. Cats were drowned, the RiverClan queen remembered sadly. Prey too, Crowfur added. The cats who survived nearly starved. May StarClan grant it's not so bad this season, Patchpelt mewed fervently. Crowfur spat. These young cats would never cope. We were tougher in those days. Fireheart could not help protesting. We have strong warriors now. Who asked your opinion? Growled the cranky old Tom. You're hardly more than a kid. But we... Fireheart broke off as the air was filled with a shrill yowl and all the cats fell silent. He turned his head to see 4 cats on top of the great rock, silhouettes in the silver moonlight. Shh, hissed Patchpelt. The meeting's about to start. He twitched his ears at Fireheart and purred softly. Take no notice of Crowfur. He'd find fault with StarClan. Fireheart gave Patchpelt a grateful look, tucked his paws under him, and settled down to listen. Tallstar, the WindClan leader, began by announcing how his cats were recovering after the recent battle against RiverClan and ShadowClan. One of our elders has died, he meowed, but all our warriors will live to fight another day, he added meaningfully. Nightstar flattened his ears and narrowed his eyes, while Crooked Star let out a threatening growl from deep in his throat. Fireheart's fur prickled. If the leaders started to fight, their cats would fight too. Had it ever happened at a gathering, he wondered? Surely not. Even Nightstar, ShadowClan's bold new leader, would risk the anger of StarClan by breaking the sacred truce. As Fireheart apprehensively watched the bristling cats, Bluestar stepped forward. This is good news, Tallstar, she meowed smoothly. All of us should rejoice to hear that WindClan grows strong again. Her blue eyes glowed in the moonlight as she glanced at the leaders of ShadowClan and RiverClan. Nightstar turned away from her gaze, and Crooked Star dipped his head, his expression unreadable. It had been ShadowClan under Broken Star's cruel command who had first driven WindClan away so that they could extend their own hunting grounds. RiverClan had taken advantage to their exile to hunt in the deserted territory, but after Broken Star's exile, Bluestar had convinced the other leaders that the life of the forest depended on all 4 clans, and that WindClan should return. Fireheart shivered as he remembered the long and difficult journey he had made with Graystripe to find WindClan and bring them home to their bleak upland territory. That reminded him of how he meant to cross the uplands again to find Ravenpaw, and he shifted uneasily. He was not looking forward to the journey. At least WindClan are friendly toward ThunderClan, he thought, so he shouldn't get attacked on the way. ThunderClan cats are also recovering, Bluestar went on. And since the last gathering, 2 of our apprentices have become warriors. They will now be known as Dustpelt and Sandstorm. Yells of approval came up from the mass of cats below the great rock. Mostly Fireheart noticed from ThunderClan and WindClan. He caught a glimpse of Sandstorm sitting with her pale ginger head raised proudly. The gathering proceeded more peacefully now. Fireheart remembered the previous gathering, when the leaders had accused one another of hunting outside their own territory, but no cat mentioned this now. A group of rogue cats, led by Brokentail, had been responsible, but the news that these rogue cats had attacked the ThunderClan camp had been soundly defeated, did not seem to have spread. Bluestar's secret about blind Brokentail was safe. When the meeting was over, Fireheart looked around for Graystripe. If they were going to see Ravenpaw, they needed to leave soon. While the other ThunderClan cats were still in the hollow and would not notice which way they went, Fireheart caught the eye of Swiftpaw, Longtail's apprentice, sitting in the middle of a group of young cats from ShadowClan. Swiftpaw looked away guiltily. At any other time, Fireheart might have called him over and told him to find his mentor for the journey home, but right now all that he cared about was finding Graystripe immediately. He forgot Swiftpaw as soon as he saw his friend weaving his way towards him. There was no sign of Silverstream. "There you are," Graystripe called, his yellow eyes shining. Fireheart could see that he had enjoyed the gathering, though he doubted his friend had listened to much of the talk. "Are you ready?" he meowed. "To go and see Ravenpaw, you mean?" "Not so loud," Fireheart hissed, anxiously looking around. "Yes, I'm ready," Graystripe mewed more softly. "I can't say I'm looking forward to it. Still, anything to get Tiger Claw out of my fur, unless you've a better idea." Fireheart shook his head. This is the only way. The hollow was still full of cats, preparing to leave in 4 directions. No cat seemed to pay any attention to Fireheart and Graystripe until they had almost reached the slope that led to WindClan's upland territory. Then a meow sounded behind them. "Hey, Fireheart, where are you going?" It was Sandstorm. Fireheart shot a desperate glance at Graystripe. "We're going a long way around," he improvised quickly. Mudclaw from WindClan told us about a warren of young rabbits just inside our territory. We thought we'd bring back some fresh kill." Suddenly alarmed by the thought that Sandstorm might offer to come with them, he added, "Tell Bluestar, will you, if she asks where we are?" "Sure." Sandstorm yawned, showing a mouthful of sharp white teeth. "I'll think about you, dashing after rabbits when I'm curled up in a nice warm nest." She patted off with a flick of her tail. Fireheart was relieved. He didn't like lying to her. "Let's go," he meowed to Graystripe, "before any of the other cats see us." The 2 young warriors slid into the shelter of the bushes and crept up the slope. At the top, Fireheart paused for a moment, looking back to make sure they had not been followed. Then he and Graystripe bounded over the rim of the hollow and raced toward the moorland, and beyond that, the 2-leg farm. "This is the only way," Fireheart repeated to himself as he ran. He had to find out the truth, not just for Redtail and Ravenpaw, but for the sake of the whole clan. Tiger Claw had to be stopped before he had the chance to kill again. Chapter 2. Fireheart sniffed warily at a path where the snow had been trampled but down by 2 legs. Lights shone from the 2-leg nest, and somewhere close by he could hear dog barking. He remembered Barley telling him that the 2-legs let their dogs off the chains at night. He just hoped that he could locate Ravenpaw before he and Graystripe were noticed. Graystripe slipped through the fence and padded up to him. The icy wind flattened his gray fur against his body. "Smell anything?" he asked. Fireheart lifted his head to taste the air, and almost at once he caught the scent he was searching for, faint but familiar. Ravenpaw. "This way," he mewed. He crept along the path, the hard surface icy under his paws. Cautiously he followed the scent to a gap at the bottom of the barn door where the wood had rotted away. He sniffed, drinking in the smell of hay and the strong, fresh scent of cats. "Ravenpaw," he whispered. When there was no reply, he repeated louder, "Ravenpaw?" "Fireheart, is that you?" A surprised moo came from the darkness on the other side of the door. "Ravenpaw!" Fireheart squeezed through the gap, thankful to be out of the wind. The scents of the barn flowed around him, and his mouth began to water as he detected the smell of mouse. The barn was dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through a small window high under the roof. As his eyes adjusted, Fireheart saw another cat standing a few tail lengths away. His friend looked even sleeker and better fed than when Fireheart had seen him last. Fireheart realized how scrawny and bedraggled he must look in comparison. Ravenpaw purred happily as he padded over to Fireheart and touched noses with him. "Welcome," he mewed. "It's good to see you." "It's good to see you," Greystripe meowed, pushing his way through the gap in the door after Fireheart. "Did you get WindClan back to their camp safely?" Ravenpaw asked. Fireheart and Greystripe had stayed with him during their journey to bring WindClan home. "Yes," mewed Fireheart, "but it's a long story. We can't... Well, what's going on here?" What's going on here? Another cat's meow interrupted them. Fireheart spun around, flattening his ears, ready to fight this newcomer with... Then he recognized Barley, the black and white loner who had willingly shared his home with Ravenpaw. "Hi, Barley," Fireheart meowed, calming down. "We just needed to talk to Ravenpaw." "So I see," Barley mewed, "and it must be important. To bring you across the moors in this weather." "Yes, it is," Fireheart agreed. He glanced at the former ThunderClan apprentice, the urgency of his mission prickling through his fur. "Ravenpaw, we haven't any time to waste." Ravenpaw looked puzzled. "You know you can talk to me as much as you want." "I'll leave you to it, then," Barley offered. "Feel free to hunt. We've plenty of mice here." He gave a friendly nod to the visiting cats and squeezed out under the door. "Hunt, really?" meowed Greystripe. Fireheart felt sharp pangs of hunger grip his belly. "Of course," mewed Ravenpaw. "Look, why don't you eat first? Then you can tell me why you're here." "I know Tiger Claw killed Redtail," Ravenpaw insisted. "I was there, and I saw him do it." The three cats were crouched in the hayloft of the two-leg barn. Hunting had not taken very long. After the desperate struggle to find prey in the snow-covered forest, the barn seemed to the hungry ThunderClan warriors to be overflowing with mice. Now Fireheart was warm, and his stomach felt comfortably full. He would have liked to curl up and sleep in the soft, fragrant hay, but he knew that he had to talk to Ravenpaw right away if he and Greystripe were to get back to camp before their absence was noticed. "Tell us everything you remember," he urged, giving Ravenpaw an encouraging nod. Ravenpaw stared ahead of him, his eyes dark as he journeyed back in his mind to the battle at the Sunning Rocks. Fireheart could see his confidence beginning to ebb. The black cat was losing himself in his memories, reliving the fear and the burden of what he knew. "I'd been wounded in the shoulder," he began. "And Redtail, he was our deputy then, as you know, told me to hide in a crack in the rock until it was safe to get away. I was just going to make a dash for it when I saw Redtail attack a RiverClan cat. I think it was that gray warrior called Stonefur. Redtail knocked Stonefur off his paws and looked as if he was about to sink in his claws for some serious injury." "Why didn't he?" Greystripe put in. "Oakheart came out of nowhere," Ravenpaw explained. "He sank his teeth into Redtail's scruff and pulled him off Stonefur." His voice shook as the memories flooded through his mind's eye. Stonefur ran away. The cat paused, unconsciously crouching down as if he were scared of something very close by. "What next?" Fireheart prompted gently. Redtail spat at Oakheart. He asked him if RiverClan warriors were unable to fight their own battles. "Redtail was brave," Ravenpaw added. "The RiverClan deputy was twice his size, and then Oakheart said a strange thing. He told Redtail, 'No ThunderClan cat will ever harm that warrior.'" "What?" Greystripe narrowed his eyes until they were yellow slits. "That doesn't make any sense. Are you sure you heard him right?" "Positive," insisted Ravenpaw. "But the clans fight all the time," meowed Fireheart. "What's so special about Stonefur?" "I don't know," Ravenpaw shrugged, shying away from their searching questions. "So what did Redtail do after Oakheart said that?" asked Greystripe. Ravenpaw's ears pricked up and his eyes widened. "He flew at Oakheart. He bowled him right off his paws and underneath a rocky overhang. I couldn't see them, though I could hear them snarling, and then I heard a rumbling sound and the rock collapsed on top of them." He stopped, shivering. "Please go on," Fireheart mewed. He hated putting Ravenpaw through this, but he had to know the truth. "I heard a screech from Oakheart, and I saw his tail sticking out from under the rocks." Ravenpaw closed his eyes as if he wanted to shut out the sight, and then opened them again. "Just then I heard Tiger Claw behind me, He ordered me to go back to the camp, but only gone a little way when I realized I had no idea if Redtail was okay after the rockfall. So I crept back, past all the River Clan warriors that were running away, and when I got to the rocks, Redtail was charging out of the dust. His tail was straight up and his fur stood on end, but he was all right, not a scratch on him that I could see, and then he ran straight into Tiger Claw, who was in the shadows. And was that when Greystripe began? Yes, Ravenpaw's claws flexed, as if he was imagining himself back in the battle. Tiger Claw grabbed Redtail, and pinned him down. Redtail struggled, but he couldn't break free, and Ravenpaw swallowed and stared at the floor. Tiger Claw sank his teeth into Redtail's throat, and it was all over. He dropped his chin onto his paws. Fireheart moved closer to him and pressed his body against Ravenpaw's flank. So Oakheart died when the rocks fell on him. It was an accident, he murmured. No cat killed him. That still doesn't prove that Tiger Claw killed Redtail, Greystripe pointed out. I don't see that any of this helps us at all. For a heartbeat, Fireheart stared at him discouraged. Then his eyes widened, and he sat up, paws tingling with excitement. Yes, it does. If we can prove the Rockfall story, it shows that Tiger Claw was lying when he said Oakheart killed Redtail, and when he claimed to have killed Oakheart in revenge. Just a minute, Greystripe interrupted. Ravenpaw, at the gathering you didn't say anything about falling rocks. You made it sound as if Redtail killed Oakheart. Did I? Ravenpaw blinked and struggled to focus on Greystripe. I didn't mean to. This is what really happened, I promise. And that's why Bluestar wouldn't listen to us, Fireheart went on excitedly. She couldn't believe that Redtail would have killed another deputy, but Redtail didn't kill him. Bluestar will have to take us seriously now. Fireheart's brain was whirling with everything they had discovered. He wanted to ask Ravenpaw more questions, but he could smell the fear scent on his friend, and saw the old, haunted look in his eyes, as if telling the story had brought back all his unhappy memories of ThunderClan. Is there any more you can tell us, Ravenpaw? He mused gently. Ravenpaw shook his head. This means so much to the clan, Fireheart told him. Hopefully now we stand a chance of convincing Bluestar that Tiger Claw is dangerous. If she listens, Greystripe pointed out, it's a pity you told her Ravenpaw's first story. He added to Fireheart, now he's changed everything, and she won't know what to believe. But he hasn't changed everything, Fireheart protested as Ravenpaw flinched at Greystripe's irritable tone. We misunderstood, that's all. I'll convince Bluestar somehow, he added. At least we know the truth now. The Black Cat looked a little happier, but Fireheart could see that he didn't want to think about the past anymore. He settled beside Ravenpaw, purring encouragement, and for a short while the three cats shared tongues. Then Fireheart pushed himself to his paws. It's time we were on our way, he meowed. Take care, Ravenpaw mewed, and watch out for Tiger Claw. Don't worry, Fireheart assured him. You've given us what we need to deal with him. With Greystripe behind him, he slid under the door and ventured out into the snow. It's freezing out here, Greystripe grumbled as they bounded down to the fence at the edge of the two-leg farm. We should have taken a couple more of those mice to feed the clan, he added. Yeah, right, Fireheart retorted. And what would you tell Tiger Claw when he asked you where you found such fat mice in this weather? The moon was close to setting, and soon the sky would begin to pale toward dawn. The chill of the snow soon penetrated Fireheart's winter-thick fur, even colder after the warmth of the barn. His legs were aching with weariness. It had been a long night, and they still had to cross WindClan's territory before they could rest in their own camp. Fireheart could not stop thinking about what Ravenpaw had told him. He was sure that his friend was telling the truth, but it would be hard to convince the rest of the clan. Bluestar had already refused to believe Ravenpaw's original story. Yet that was when Fireheart thought Redtail had killed Oakheart. Bluestar could not accept that Redtail would kill another warrior unnecessarily. Now Fireheart understood the real story, that Oakheart had died by accident. But how could Fireheart accuse Tiger Claw again unless he had something to back up what Ravenpaw had told him? The River Clan cats would know, he realized aloud, pausing under a rocky outcrop on the moorland slope where the snow was not so thick. What? Meowed Greystripe, padding up to him to share a shelter. No, what? How Oakheart died, Fireheart replied. They must have seen Oakheart's body. They would be able to tell us whether he died from a rock fall and not a death blow from a warrior. Yeah, the marks on his body would prove it, agreed Greystripe. And they might know what Oakheart meant when he said that no ThunderClan cat should attack Stonefur. Fireheart added. We need to speak to a RiverClan warrior who took part in the battle. Maybe Stonefur himself? But you can't just walk into RiverClan camp and ask, Greystripe protested. Think of how tense it was at the gathering. It's too soon after the battle. I know one RiverClan warrior who would welcome you, Fireheart murmured. If you mean Silverstream, yes, I could ask her, Greystripe agreed. Now can we please get back to the camp before my paws freeze completely? The two cats padded onward, more slowly now as weariness made their limbs heavy. They were within sight of 4 trees when they spotted 3 other cats climbing the hillside. The breeze carried the scent of a WindClan patrol to Fireheart. Not wanting to explain their presence in WindClan territory, he looked swiftly around for cover, but the snow stretched smoothly on all sides, with no rocks or bushes nearby. And it was clear that the WindClan cats had already seen them as they changed direction to meet them. Fireheart recognized the familiar, uneven gait of the clan deputy, Deadfoot, with the tabby warrior, Torn Ear, and his apprentice, Running Paw. Hello, Fireheart, called Deadfoot, limping up with a puzzled look in his eyes. You're a long way from home. Yeah, Fireheart admitted, dipping his head respectfully. We picked up a ShadowClan scent trail, and it led us up here. ShadowClan on our territory? Deadfoot's fur began to bristle. I reckon it was an old scent, Greystripe put it hastily. Nothing to worry about. We're sorry we crossed your border. You're welcome here, meowed Torn Ear. The other clans would have destroyed us in the last battle if your clan hadn't helped. Now we're sure they'll keep away. They know they have ThunderClan to reckon with. Fireheart felt embarrassed at Torn Ear's praise. He and Greystripe had helped the WindClan cats in the past, but this time he was uncomfortable with the thought that any cat from WindClan had seen them on their territory. We'd best be getting back, he murmured. Everything seems quiet enough up here. May StarClan light your path, meowed Deadfoot gratefully. The other WindClan cats wished Fireheart and Greystripe good hunting and went on toward their own camp. That was bad luck, Fireheart growled as he and Greystripe padded down to 4 trees. Why? Asked Greystripe. The WindClan cats didn't mind us on their territory. We're all friends now. Use your brains, Greystripe, Fireheart meowed. What if Deadfoot mentions that he saw us to Blue Star at the next gathering? She's bound to wonder what we were doing out here. Greystripe stopped. Mouth stung, he spat. I never thought of it that way. His eyes met Fireheart's, and Fireheart saw his own uneasy feelings reflected there. Blue Star won't like it if she finds out we're sneaking around investigating Tiger Claw. Fireheart shrugged. Let's just hope we can settle all of this before the next gathering. Now come on, we ought to try and catch something to take back with us. He set off again, picking up the pace until the 2 cats were racing over the snow. As they skirted the hollow at 4 trees and entered their own forest territory, he relaxed a little, pausing to drink the air in hope of picking up the scent of prey. Greystripe sniffed hopefully among the roots of a nearby tree and came back looking disappointed. Nothing, he grumbled. Not a single mouse, not even a whisker. We haven't got time to keep looking, Fireheart decided. He saw that the sky was already growing lighter above the trees. Time was running out, and their absence from camp was more likely to be noticed with every heartbeat. The dawn light was growing stronger as they reached the ravine, limbs aching with weariness, muscles stiff with cold. Fireheart led the way silently between the boulders toward the gorse tunnel. Thankful to be home at last, he bounded into the tunnel's dark mouth. As he emerged into the camp, he skidded to a halt so abruptly that Greystripe cannoned into him from behind. Move, you big furball! Greystripe gave a muffled mew. Fireheart didn't reply. Sitting a few tail lengths away in the middle of the clearing was Tiger Claw. His head was sunk below his massive shoulders, and his yellow eyes were gleaming with triumph. Maybe you'd like to tell me where you've been, he growled, and why it took you so long to get back from the gathering? And that's where we'll leave it for the night. I hope everyone enjoyed listening, and I hope you have a good evening and a good night. Till next time, my friends. Take care.